guys, so today on BKRsport, we are back for another In the Sheds with the boys. Absolutely loving this podcast series already, and we've only done it for one on the trot. Yes, we have our brand new podcast series, so if you are a sport fan, this is definitely the place for you to be. Our first topic last week, we were discussing what the effects of sport are actually in society. Obviously, with what we've kind of been going through outside of sport and in the world, we're very well aware of what's going on right now. It's really shone a light onto the effects that sport truly has on society, on mental health, on the economical situation, and just, you know, the travel industry, everything to do with how you live your life. It's truly impacted in so many more ways than just, I want to watch the footy on Friday night. So that was a very interesting topic. If you haven't checked that one out yet, go back and go and have a listen to that one. But tonight, I am very, very, very interested in tonight's discussion. We're going to be discussing the biggest rivalries in rugby league. Now, obviously, you know, we are going to go through different sports over time, and this is definitely a topic that we can come back and we can talk about with the NBA or with the Premier League or rugby or AFL. You know, this topic can seriously be brought across any sport. But tonight, we're specifically going to be talking about rugby league, and this is going to be very interesting to hear about the differing opinions. Now, you guys obviously know that we do have Shirls and Entertain House, who will be joining me as co-host. We do have Jesse Parahi coming up in the upcoming weeks. He is the Australian Sevens captain. He'll be joining us for one In the Sheds podcast. Boys, today we're going to be discussing the biggest rivalries in rugby league. I'm here with a big fella, Luke, who is Shirls, and Hayden, Entertain House. How are we doing today, boys?
You actually called me by my first name for once, Blaze. It's cute.
Oh, what do you want me? What do you want me to call you, mate? What?
Big Daddy. Big Daddy.
I'm never ever going to call you Big Daddy. I can
tell him the truth, Blaze. Tell him the truth.
You've literally just ruined Hayden's bloody intro because all you want to be called is Big Daddy. Like, this is outrageous. Today, obviously, guys, we're going to be discussing the biggest rivalries in rugby league. Now, there is a lot of rivalries in rugby league, but I really want to try and focus on today being about finding the biggest one, and whether it be past, present, future. So the way this is going to be laid out, basically, is we're going to go through all 16 teams. We're going to basically come together and discuss who we think is each team's rival. And then from there, we're going to kind of rate the biggest rivalry based on that. Then we can also go back into the past, see which is the biggest overall, the one currently at present, and what we think is going to happen in the future. So how do we think about that one?
Yeah, it sounds like a good way to start things off, doesn't it? Or this is our second podcast technically for the year. So, yeah, let's get to it.
Yeah, this sounds like my type of night. I'm keen.
Yeah, Hayden, you were telling me before you think this is your time to shine.
I do. I think my rugby league knowledge is very good, and I love my rivalries.
You can't not like your rivalries. You can't not love them. You know, they just bring you so much passion.
Hayden is the chaser of rugby league, pretty much. He is the beast.
He's the
of rugby league.
Chaser. What's the chat? What do you mean, chaser?
Show. You're kidding me. You're kidding me.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so
they have TV in Fiji.
Oh, here we go. Here we bloody damn well go. Sorry, I hear the chaser. I'm like,
too busy at the beach. Too busy at the beach,
mate. We're not even allowed to leave the house either, but people still are. But they're idiots. But we're not going to talk about that. So anyway, boys, let's get straight into it. Now we're going to start off with the Brisbane Broncos. Now I'm going to leave it back to you guys. Who we calling their biggest rivals right now, or just in general? Who's the Brisbane Broncos' biggest rivals?
North Queensland Cowboys. It's as simple as that. And you started off the podcast with a great way of opening, saying that we're speaking about the future of rivalry. I think the Broncos are really starting to get the better of them. The rivalry between the Broncos and the Cowboys is always something to remember. I think it's a new generation of rivalry and is now dubbed as the Queensland Derby.
Yeah, I would definitely have to agree with Hayden, just because I think the grand final from, I think it was 2016 against the Cowboys.
Yeah. You're a Sharks fan. You're a Sharks fan, and you're telling me you thought the 2016 that was the Sharks grand final. I thought it was
17. I like to think it was closer than what it actually was.
Yeah, exactly.
But that topped off the rivalry between the Broncos and the Cowboys. I think just with the Jonathan Thurston winning field goal. But yeah, I would have to agree with Hayden. Obvious rivals. It's always a great match. But I think, yes, the Broncos just have a very youthful squad now, especially the forward pack. and I think they're going to get the better of the Cowboys for a long time. The Cowboys fullback should be playing for the Sharks, so that's another thing letting them down.
He hasn't been great to start this season. But anyway,
Nah, he'll be good. He'll be good. He'll come through. He will.
I hope so, but
I think
I'm gonna have to weigh and say, yeah, obviously we're all very well aware that the Cowboys are the Broncos' biggest rivalries right now. However, if we go back into a little bit into the past, they do have a rivalry with Melbourne around that 2006 area where they played in the grand final, and I feel like a lot of teams end up getting these rivalries from like a grand final loss, and I feel like we'll get to Manly versus Storm in a moment, which is a big reason. But the point of the matter is that I feel like this rivalry between the Broncos and Cowboys really did heat up in 2015 from that grand final, because obviously we all know it was it was outrageous. The finish was just absolutely outrageous.
Probably the best grand final ever, yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
It was definitely one of them, yes. Yeah, 100%. I think it was...
That's interesting. Maybe that could be another topic, Blaze. Best games of footy ever.
Well, just a best in whatever sport, best game that was best game in the sport. So let's move on to the next one, and we'll go with the Parramatta Eels. Now, Hayden, you're obviously a Parramatta fan. Who do you think is Parramatta's biggest rival?
Got to be between two teams. I think a lot of people will disagree with me. I have Manly as our biggest rival. I think we've had 50 years of rivalry with the club. We both entered in 1947. Those three grand finals that we had together. And look, these days, I think Parramatta's biggest rivalry is the Bulldogs. And you can even say that the Bulldogs rivalry began back a while ago as well, in around the 80s, 70s, those times. But for me, I think Manly Sea Eagles are the biggest rivalry with the Eels.
I don't know, man. I really don't know if I can... I know that Manly and Parramatta, they despise each other. They do have a rivalry that goes back years. However, there is the Bulldogs, obviously, and they're someone that I feel like... And I'm not a Parramatta fan, so I'm not saying that you're wrong, but, I personally right now would say it's the Bulldogs.
Yeah,
I would say it's the Bulldogs, just based. I think it was back in the 80s where Sterling was playing, and they had a massive kind of local rivalry going. They're both rivals now because they've both been struggling for a while until recently. Until Parramatta have been playing good in recent seasons. I would say it's Penrith, maybe.
Panthers are there, but that's more local. Is it really a heated rivalry? That's a local rivalry, and you want to win it, but is it heated?
I don't think Parramatta really have a get-at-'em type of rivalry with many of the teams at the moment. Nothing like a Storm and Manly. Yeah, it's a weird one. I would say it's the Bulldogs probably, but not really any massive rivals I can think of just based on emotion.
I would personally actually say...
Or antics, yeah.
In regards to that, I actually would then, if you're going to go based on the emotion and how much the team arcs up, you said that, the Eels don't really have a specific get up and at 'em with any team. I would probably agree with Hayden in regards to Manly if that was the case. I feel like Parramatta would want to win that game. That would probably be, in my opinion, I'm going to side with you there, Hayden. I'm going to say Eels and Manly on the Eels side of things. On the Eels side, not from Manly's side, on the Eels side.
Yep. No, I think Eels and Manly's rivalry is big. I think the Bulldogs, as you guys mentioned, is big, but I think our arch rivals are the Sea Eagles.
Alrighty, next up we're going to move on to Newcastle, with the Newcastle Knights. Who are we calling as their biggest rivals?
St. George Illawarra.
Oh, what? That's interesting.
That what? Excuse me?
Sorry?
I'm going to go the Dragons.
The Dragons?
Sorry, sir?
The Dragons are nice.
I'm going to go the Dragons and the Knights. Old boys' day,
What?
They're starting to call it.
What, because Knights slay dragons or something?
Is this like a medieval rivalry? What's this?
RuneScape rivalry.
RuneScape rivalry. Please explain, Hayden.
Go on, Hayden.
You go on, Hayden. We're gonna stop your opinions here. Hayden, why are you saying the Knights and Dragons?
I really think that they create some exciting games, and they love to hate each other. I think they create some exciting games as well. As I mentioned, they now call it Old Boys' Day, and you think of players like Gareth Widdop going against Danny Badiris. They really look like they were giving it their all in those games. I just think the Knights really look forward to playing the Dragons, and I don't know if it's a rivalry thing or if it's more excitement, but I think that's the team that they do their best against.
All right. That's a weird one.
I definitely was not
I would-
expecting it. I definitely was not expecting it. I can understand what you're saying, but I definitely was not expecting it.
I would say back in the day, I think the Knights and Parramatta actually had it because the grand final back in the day kind of had a bit of a thing going on there. But I think they're one of those teams like Parramatta. They don't have a massive ill-blooded match against anyone. It's just they're a good, they're respected as a team. They go, it's going to be a hard one and it's just going to be a good match. I don't think anyone's going, oh, we're out to get them because, we have a rivalry for 50 years with them or anything. So there's no real local rivalries. You could say the Roosters maybe or Manly, like they're only up the M1. Apart from that, not particularly.
Well, that's exactly where I'm going to jump in, actually. That's exactly where I'm going to jump in because and everyone's going to say, look, everyone hates Manly because, everyone does hate Manly. And,
They do.
And Manly fans do.
They really do.
Manly fans probably realise that they actually hate Manly too, but it's just they love to hate them. But look, with Manly, I feel like the Knights and Manly go back quite a long time. Obviously, the 1997 grand final where Darren Albert scores the try on the siren.
Yeah.
Oh, how good's that, eh?
It's incredible.
There's an interview with Joey Johnson, his brother, the day
it's incredible.
after. Oh,
no,
it's
not. Is it the day
It's
after?
classic.
It's the morning after, isn't it? But he's still on the same day.
Prime Joey, mate. Prime Joey.
Prime Joey walks in with his hat. He just straddles on in. So it's really strange. We've got three different opinions here. So I'm going with Knights and Manly on the Knights side of things. Hayden's going Knights and the Dragons, and Luke, you were going the Knights and the Eels, were you?
Their own club is their own rival. To be honest, they're the reason they let themselves down over the past. But if you have to pick a team, I would say Manly. To be honest, everyone hates Manly.
Everyone hates Manly. So we'll move on. I think the consensus there were probably obviously Hayden, you did go Dragons, but I feel like with two going with Manly, we're going to have to just go with the consensus of Manly in this situation. But there is no real ill blood, as you guys were saying. They don't really have that. The Knights just don't really have that in them, in my opinion. But then again, a Newcastle fan could prove me wrong.
I think I would have gone Manly, but the fact that, and if you've got stats and stuff and you're looking at them right now, Manly have an amazing record against Newcastle.
Recently.
Yeah, and that's why I think it struggles to be a rivalry. But as you said, if you go back to those days of the 90s, then yes, the Knights and Manly are massive rivals. But I just think, again, future generation comes with the Dragons.
Well, there's actually been a lot of rivalries that have died over the years. It's just how it goes when teams aren't doing well. Rivalries, they fall apart. And to specifically bring one up, I would nearly say, no, we're going to leave that for later because I'll bring it back up later.
No spoilers, boys. No spoilers.
No spoilers. We're not going to do a National Isolation League spoiler tonight either. Let's move on to the next one, and we're going to go with the Canberra Raiders. This is going to be an interesting one. I feel like I know which one I'm going to go with, and it's
same here. I think we're going to say the same thing. Go on.
Okay. Well, let's let Hayden go
on
first.
3, 2, 1, we'll say it.
All right.
Oh,
Three,
I'm trying to think.
3, 2, 1.
Roosters.
The Roosters.
Yeah, bingo.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I'm going to say quickly.
Yeah.
I'm going to say quickly on that. I don't think it's look. It's not a rivalry yet. It's something that they obviously very much dislike. It's brewing on the Raiders' end. I don't think it's brewing on the Roosters' end whatsoever. I think it's only brewing on the Raiders' end. But if it wasn't for the Roosters, I'd say the Sharks.
I'd say Sharks, I think.
I really feel like it's the Roosters because the grand final. If Latrell was still at the Roosters, I think it'd be even bigger. But I really think that there's some massive rivalry brewing there now, just because of the whole. The ball hit the trainer. They were robbed at the end. Six again. I feel like it's there now to have a crack. Like, these are two of the best teams in the comp, arguably. So I think it's there now to really have a rivalry.
I'll go with you. I think Sharks, as Blaze said, comes close, but I think there's a rivalry brewing. I think it's been there for a couple of years as well. I think there's been some close games and a bit of dirty plays, some
Well, I feel like it's a rivalry based on quality. It's one of those rivalries based on the teams are good and they're just having a go at each other, just like we mentioned before, like Storm and Manly for the last 10 or 15 years or so. It's one based on quality just because the teams are just that good trying to fight it out. So it's an interesting one, yeah.
Yeah, what I would say right now is that the Raiders have the team to beat the Roosters. Now, In
Yeah.
recent years, the Roosters have been winning, but the Raiders really have the squad now to make it a competitive rivalry. If you went back the last 10 years, could you say that Raiders and Roosters rivalry was completely matched and
No.
fair?
Well,
Absolutely not.
like I just said, I don't even believe that the Raiders and Roosters have a rivalry yet, but they're going to, is what I'm saying. I don't think that they have it right now, but I feel like if I'm going to call a rival, I would say on behalf of the Raiders end, not on the Roosters end, I would say on behalf of the Raiders end, I feel like they will begin to despise the Roosters a lot more because of that situation. And just like I said in regards to grand finals are a real massive catalyst for a fresh rivalry to brew from.
Yeah,
just
I
like
feel
Broncos
like
and
it's I feel like a top 8 match or a finals match really starts a rivalry. I just feel like as long as the Raiders have the majority of that grand final squad still around, like Jack White and your Papalis, Crokers, etc., there's gonna be some ill blood between those two teams.
I will also just quickly before we move on, I'm not going to say that it's a heated rivalry, but the Raiders also do have a slight rivalry with the Storm, simply because they've actually had a decent record against them. They're always the bogey team for the Storm, and it's a really interesting one. I'm not going to say it's like the Raiders want to go down there and their fans want to punch on with the Melbourne Storm fans like we do have with specific rivalries. But the Raiders, obviously, they have a boat, and that's what you find rivalries as well. There's the bogey teams.
I think the Raiders beat the Storm 3 times last year, so I feel like the Sharks. If we're gonna go with Melbourne, I feel like the Sharks have been having a bit of a rivalry with the Storm in the last few years. I know they lost them the other week or whatever, but I feel like they've been a team that the Storm haven't really got the best of in the last few years, ever since the grand final again, like we said. So
okay, well look, I'm gonna let's move it on to. I'm gonna use the Sharks then, because this will be a big one, because I find the Cronulla Sharks actually have quite a few potential rivalries here. I'll go with you first, Luke, because obviously you are a Sharks fan. Who do you believe is your biggest rival?
I would say locally St. George. I would say the West Tigers are a bit of a rival because the whole Paul Gallen thing, but I feel like I feel like something had been brewing between the teams for a while. I don't know. It's like the team from the West versus the team from the Shire kind of thing. But I would say the Storm have been a bit of a ill-blooded
most consistent rivalry
for the last few years.
Yeah, I'll agree with you. I think it's the Storm in recent years, but I think Cronulla have a bit of a rivalry with Manly.
Bingo, 100%. I was waiting.
Yes, that's actually true. No, I do agree with you. When Cherry Evans kicked that field goal against Cronulla when I was at Shark Park, I think last year, I was with you, Blaze.
Luke. Yeah. It was
They really didn't like that. They hated it.
Right now, I actually had 3 try scorers. I forget. Valentine Holmes, Trebojevic. I went $400 off that match. I had Manly 1-12 for that match. I remember the match you're talking about that went to Golden Point and Cherry Evans kicked the one. Yeah. Killer game.
Yeah, it was a killer game because I believe the Sharks were actually up by like 12 with a few minutes to go, and then Manly came storming back. But with what my thoughts are, there is multiple teams here. You've got the Storm, who are the most consistent rivalry from the Sharks since probably around the grand final of 2016. It really started to heat up. But you've also got the Canberra Raiders because the Mick Ennis clap. That really initiated a rivalry there.
Yes.
You've got Manly because the Manly Seagulls have always had an incredibly good record against them. It's their bogey team, and obviously it's the Battle of the Beaches. So you've got the North Beaches versus the South Beaches of Sydney. And then you've also got the St. George Illawarra Dragons, who are incredibly close, and they're literally 10 minutes apart. And the fact is, Sharks are currently having to use their stadium. Well, obviously not now, but they had to use their stadium whilst Shark Park is being rebuilt, basically.
Well, there's a lot of juniors that come through that play for each of those teams, the Dragons and the Sharks, and they've come from each of their youth systems and pretty much just change clubs if they don't make one of the teams. So, and pinch them. So it is very interesting. Like Tyson Frizzell was a Sharks junior and stuff like that. So it is interesting. Yeah, they do have a few rivals I didn't even really know of.
Look, I would agree with a lot of those. This is a very, very small one. I wouldn't put it anywhere near the likes of Manly, Raiders, Storm, or Dragons.
Penrith?
Funnily enough, well, yes and no. Funnily enough, it's actually a little bit Gold Coast Titans. Now, you may laugh at that. The fact of the matter is that the
Come on, Blaze.
No, it's not on.
It's April Fool's. It's April Fool's.
It's not. It's not on behalf of the Titans here. Like we don't care about the Sharks, but for some reason the Titans have a pretty decent record against the Sharks, and it always is an incredibly close game. And I don't know if you remember this. In the year that you guys did win the premiership in 2016, you guys were on a win streak, a record-breaking win streak.
And you broke it.
And we were the ones who broke it with that 16-16 draw up on the Gold Coast that I did vlog. I was there. The point of the matter is that for some reason, I always feel like this. I feel different when we play in the Sharks. I get this a little bit of animosity feeling, not like a really threatening animosity feeling, but I just feel like there is something there. It's not big. It's not small.
I know what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about, Blaze. Sharks, when they do a Sharks. They really do a Sharks.
They know they're very innovative in the ways that they lose.
They against the Storm the other day. The game was over. Just play safe, run the ball up, good kick game, tackle, and they did a Sharks. They did a Sharks, mate. And yeah, the Titans are one of those teams where they start doing that. I don't know if it's complacency, but
I don't know.
Titans got a good start to them against Magic Round last year, but the Sharks ran away with it. As Blaze says, the Titans really competitive with the Sharks, and they look evenly matched when they play each other, but on paper you wouldn't think it.
Well, on paper you wouldn't think the Titans against anyone. But anyway, we're not going to... just quickly, let's get a little bit of a consensus going. Who are we saying is the biggest rival for the Sharks?
It's the Dragons, to be honest, yeah.
And Hayden?
It's either Storm or Dragons for me. I think if we're going off all time, I'm going to go Dragons. But if we're going off recent Storm, so I'll go Dragons. I'll go with Luke.
I'm actually going to go with the Storm. I'm going to say the Storm. I feel like they're always very close games, and I feel like there's a lot of animosity between those two teams. I feel like they both equally don't like each other. I feel like Melbourne have a bigger rival, but I feel like the Sharks are definitely their second biggest rival. So let's move on to that. I'm going to open it up with the Melbourne Storm, who are we calling their biggest rivals?
Mate, everyone.
There's a lot.
No one likes Melbourne. It would have to, I would say one would be Broncos.
I think that's kind of fizzled out a bit.
I think it's one that's disappeared.
Yeah, it's fizzled out.
Manly is definitely one, just because the whole Glenn Stewart, Adam Blair thing back in the day. How many grand finals have they had? How many close games have they had?
I don't agree that it was because of that, though. I believe it started when
it was before that.
Manly
it started before that.
Well, Manly, obviously the 40-0 was the catalyst. The 40-0 was the one that really got the Melbourne Storm going in the grand final when they lost 40-0. But there was also, I think they lost the year before, 28-12 or 28-6 in the grand final, was it? To the Storm?
Yeah, Manly lost and then they whooped them the next year.
Yeah, they whooped them 40-0. So I feel like that was the catalyst rather than the Glenn Stewart. I feel like that was just, the continuation. That was the real fire.
That was the peak.
Yeah.
I feel like that was the peak of it.
But it's still going to this day. But Hayden, who are you calling?
I agree. Manly is my number one for Storm. There's a few you could chuck in, but Manly is the one that they compete with, whether it's at Amy, whether it's the Battle of Brookie. It's always a classic, or most of the time, it's a classic battle.
And Manly get to them. Manly get to them. I don't know what it is. They really do, especially Cherry Evans, really just gets to them.
Yeah,
I think a bit of their rivalry would have been reignited last year when Tom Trbojevic went off the field and Melbourne put, 14 points against the Sea Eagles and the Storm won the minor premiership. I think that really would have ticked Manly off to make them as competitive as they would be for this year against them.
Look, as you said, I feel like there could be a couple of teams that you throw in here. Obviously, we all know that the biggest rivals are Manly. Simple as that. I'm not even going to argue it at all. But there are a couple of really intriguing, weird rivalries. Like obviously, we did speak about the Raiders. There was the Broncos that fizzled out quite a bit. That was at its peak around the early. The very late 2000s, early 2010s, after the 2006 grand final, that was when they won 15-8 or whatever it was, the Broncos over the Storm. I actually have there's a really strange thing that goes on with the Warriors each year with the Storm as well. I'm not going to say it's a big rivalry, but there's something there. And like I said, the Raiders...
I'd say it's heating up. I think it's something that's brewing, like that Raiders and Roosters. There's tension growing.
Is it though? Because the Warriors aren't looking good for the future at all, and the Storm are always looking good.
Yeah, the Storm just keep on keeping on. Honestly, it's weird how good they are.
Well, it's not. It's because it's Craig Bellamy. It's not the play. Look, it is.
Yeah,
as much
but
as it's the players, it's Craig Bellamy.
Two people leave, two people come in and just do the job.
That's because it's Craig Bellamy. When do people start realising that it's not necessarily the players, it's how Craig Bellamy gets stuff out of the person?
Until Cameron Smith leaves, I think we'll really be able to see.
That'll be a good point, yeah. Because Cooper Cronk and Billy Slater and all that, like they were catalysts, they were big parts of the team, but the hooker, Cameron Smith, has always dictated the play.
You know who else I think Storm have a little bit of a rivalry? You may disagree, but I think South Sydney Rabbitohs. I think they always seem to push them, and I think there's something heat in there as well. I think there's some clashes that you can look back on in regards to rivalry there. And I don't know, I see a rivalry between the Storm and the Rabbitohs.
I reckon it's, look, I wouldn't call that a
Roosters.
No, Rabbitohs, you said. I wouldn't call that a rivalry at all. I just feel like that's a game against two teams that both teams want to beat the other team. I don't think it's a rivalry such. I just think it's a generic game that both teams understand the quality that the other team possesses, and they just really want to win that matchup. So yeah, that would be what I'd have to say about that. But obviously we can all agree that Melbourne's biggest rivals are Manly. Now, let's go to the Penrith Panthers, who we call them.
I don't know. This is a tricky one.
Tigers maybe?
I think the Tigers is more on the Tigers end.
Yeah. I don't know what Battle of the West kind of thing, but Panthers are kind of just really super West. I don't know. I know they're kind of on their own, you know what I mean? I would say the Sharks in a weird way.
I disagree with Sharks. I know what you're saying, but I disagree with Sharks. I understand what you're saying though in regards to they're kind of out on their own out there.
I think it would be Parramatta, but I'll probably go with Luke's what he said about his first or second rivalry, that there actually isn't one. It's just one of those teams that, yes, is in the competition, yes, plays some good footy, but there's no physical rivalry. But as you said, the Battle of the West, and me being an Eels fan, it's not something I look forward to, though. I don't consider it.
I think
that
it was
much truly as.
I think it was something to look forward to when it was at Pertec, and I'm not a big. I think it was a lot better at that when it was at Pertec and when it's out at Panthers at Penrith. I feel like it was a lot more of a local rivalry. It felt like a local home ground rivalry. But with Bankwest being a big stadium now, I feel like it will detach that very local Battle of the West feeling and vibe around it, because it's like an ANZ now. It's like a Suncorp. It just takes away that feeling that you get when it was the Battle of the West between two, hard grinders out in those areas.
It's more of a Wembley Stadium. It's more of a Wembley Stadium feel. Like it's a big event rather than just, this is a local derby kind of match at a small stadium.
Yeah, 100%. So I think we're all going to come to a consensus there and say that they don't really have a rivalry, but if they did have a rivalry, it'd be classified as the Eels. And I just feel like it was a lot bigger previously. Now let's move on to our next one. We're going to go with the Cowboys. So are we going to say basically the Cowboys on their end is also the Broncos?
Yes. 100%.
I agree. I think it is also the Broncos. They do have look. I noticed on Zero Tackle, and I did actually have a little bit of a look at what other people are saying. But the Zero Tackle have it as Cowboys versus Sharks, and I'm very intrigued by this. Like, I understand the seven tackle set.
It's
but
weird,
Like the 7 tackle set.
We're still going on about that.
Well, like, to me, I don't really care. I'm like, that was in the beginning of the game. It was a terrible call, but like, you had 70 minutes or 75 minutes or whatnot to make up for that mistake the referee did, and they nearly did. But it is what it is. I just don't see any rivalry there with the Cowboys and Sharks. I don't see it personally.
No. It's a Broncos rivalry based on quality, and they're both the Queensland teams that are, Titans are there too, but they were the kind of main known Queensland teams. It's just that Queensland rivalry.
They've been Queensland teams for a lot longer than the Titans have been in the competition, so that's why it's been a lot more brewing. And obviously, the Cowboys and the Broncos have had a lot more quality seasons than the old Titans.
Yeah. They've had a rivalry for a while. You guys said, and I do agree, that it really did ignite more in the
2015.
What was it? 2015 grand final.
Cowboys have always been the little brother kind of thing.
100%.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But I think between 2000 to 2006, there were some games where they had a bit of rivalry and were kind of close games as well. They've always had it. If you backtrack it, they've always had this rivalry between both clubs.
Well, the Cowboys have had some crazy good players like Matt Singh,
Thurston.
Matty Bowen.
Matty Bowen.
Yeah, like quality players. They've just. I know. I feel like the Broncos have always been we're the elite team. We're the Queensland team. We kind of run
Like
this thing and
Corey Parkers
Well,
and
look,
your
this
Darren
is
Lockyer
what I'll
and
compare it
players
to.
like that.
This is what
Shane
this,
Webke.
This is what I'll
Tony
compare it
Carroll,
to.
yeah.
Shane
Obviously, I'm going to take this and compare it to the Premier League. So we've seen with, for example, Manchester City and Manchester United how until 2011-12, Manchester United didn't give an absolute flying shit about Manchester City because they were basically we were a nothing team. We were a nothing team until 2011-12 when we ended up beating beating United at Old Trafford 6-1. Now that was a key turning point. Now the rivalry was always there. But there was nothing there that really ignited that rivalry beyond just a regular local derby.
It wasn't a United Liverpool rivalry based on who's going to go for the competition title. It was just they're
it was
there
local.
kind
No.
of thing.
It was just simply local. It was just simply local, and that's what I'm going to compare with the Broncos and Cowboys because the Broncos and Cowboys always had a rivalry, just like Manchester United and Manchester City always had a rivalry. But Manchester United had the biggest rivalry with Liverpool, and at the time, in those times you are talking about, Hayden, I think the Broncos' biggest rival was the Storm, because around those 2006 times. So I feel like that's a really good comparison.
Origin.
And then
I feel like it was because of Origin. The Storm and the Broncos had half pretty much Origin. Most of the forwards in the Broncos, and then you had the Cooper Cronk.
It's simply because they were the two best teams,
etc.
It's simply because they were the two best teams at the time. 2006, Broncos and Storm were really
Greg Inglis, yeah.
Yeah, Greg Inglis, you had your Darren Lockyers, you had all that. So that's how I'd say. And then 2015...
Falau played for both.
Exactly.
Falau played for both.
Exactly. Yeah. But 2015 is what I'd say is the 6-1 comparison of the City United score, where United started to really think, you know what, our noisy neighbours have woken up. And I feel like with the Broncos and Cowboys, where the Cowboys, they finally got over them and they did it on the big stage, that was the equivalent of a 6-1 where the Broncos realised, holy shit, this team is actually here and they are a quality team and they're our biggest, and they've become the biggest rivalry since then.
I agree.
So obviously we're going to go and tick that one off. We've got Cowboys and the Broncos. Next up, we've got one that I feel like we're all going to have the same answer with, but in the same sense, there is a couple of others. Let's go with the South Sydney Rabbitohs.
Oh, you've got to say the Roosters. You've got to. This is look, guys.
What 100 years?
112. 112.
Going back to the topic, what is the best rivalry in rugby league? You guys may disagree with me, and as I spoke, Broncos and Cowboys is a new generation of rivalry, but Rabbits and Roosters is 112 years worth of rivalry. And they're always two class act Sydney teams. And it's not just rivalry, it always seems like war. And the funny thing is that Souths have the advantage here. Souths have 126 wins, the Roosters have 111. So the Rabbits have the better of the Roosters, and there's also been 7 draws. So this for me is the best rivalry in rugby league.
I'm not going to disagree with you. I'm not going to disagree. We're going to...
I agree.
I agree and also disagree, but we're going to get to the biggest rivalry specifically in league after we get through these teams. But in regards to the Rabbitohs, look, obviously the Roosters is their biggest rivalry, and that's the team they want to beat. That's the only team they really they really truly care each year. They look for that. I've been to the Rabbitohs Roosters. I was there for the semi-final or whatever it was in 2018 at the old Allianz Stadium, and I felt it. I was a part of the Bunnies. The Burrow. And I felt it. Obviously, I know the Rabbitohs really hate the Roosters. However, they also do have a rivalry with the Dragons. And that goes back to the old English days. These two teams have a very massive English population from the olden days when, before the 50s, the Rabbitohs and the Dragons had a really long-standing rivalry that doesn't get spoken about to the extent that it probably deserves. I'm not putting it up there with the Roosters. I'm putting it probably as their second biggest rivals, but the Dragons definitely need to be noted as a big rival of the Rabbitohs too.
The Charity Shield. game.
Yeah, Charity Shield. Yeah,
Charity
there's an
Shield.
example of it.
Exactly. Well, obviously, you've got a lot of English migration as well over in the early 1900s.
Post-war migration as well.
Well,
Charity Shield doesn't even feel like a trial game anymore. It feels like you're watching a full-on game of the season because of the rivalry between those clubs. So yeah, I agree with you, Blaze. The Dragons definitely do have a rivalry with Souths.
yeah, 100%. So we're obviously all going to agree on the Roosters being their biggest rivals, but the Dragons, I believe, would be very close behind. Next up, let's go with the West Tigers.
Themselves.
No, I agree. I definitely agree on that. But there is.
I'm not even joking though. It's themselves. They are their own rivals. Obviously, they're a merger club between Balmain and Western Suburbs. But would you say what was Balmain's rival? Because of how it goes back in the past, like Balmain and the Raiders had rivalry back in the day. But what would you say, Blaze?
Well, I don't really like. Obviously, I'm only 25 years old, so I can't really go too far back. But I would nearly assume that Balmain and Glebe would have a rivalry back in the day.
Yeah, it's a weird one because they have a lot of history, just like the Dragons. Illawarra Steelers, and the merging there. It's just I feel like the Tigers' biggest rival is weirdly like kind of everyone. Like there just seems to be a bit of, I don't know, animosity between a lot of teams, but I feel like maybe the Bulldogs, I don't know why, it just seems like there's been a rivalry, and the Roosters.
I can see what you're saying. I don't find that there's any rivalry with the Tigers. The only thing that I can see that's kind of fresh to the system and that is new is with the Panthers with the Cleary situation. That's the only thing that I would find on the Tigers end. The Panthers don't care about that situation. But I find that on the Tigers' end, I would probably go and say that their biggest rivals right now would be the Panthers. But at the same time, it's like we just spoke about with the Panthers before. Like, the Panthers don't have a real rival. They have someone who they classify who they probably want to win the most against. And I find that the Tigers probably want to win their most against the Panthers.
I feel like the Tigers, one of those teams that are in the bottom of the 8, they can cause an upset over teams that annoys them, but they're not a team that spark an immediate rivalry with anyone.
The Sharks are there too, like you said before, Luke.
Yeah, Sharks. I was going to mention that again, but I feel like it's literally themselves.
There's a few teams like that, though. I agree. There's a few teams like that, but I just feel like, especially with that, I feel like we're going to miss out on I'm going to say this right now. I think that with this whole situation right now, with there not being any rugby league, we're going to miss out on the potential rivalry of the Tigers versus Sharks, thanks to the fact that the Sharks were the ones who sealed their position in 9th, created all those memes, made a massive joke out of the Tigers, and not to mention Paul Gallen, a front row forward, kicking a field goal in Leichhardt in front of a sold-out Leichhardt. I was there. I vlogged that game. It was incredible to be at, and I supported the Sharkies because obviously my mum's a massive Sharkies fan, so I get around them. But I just feel like the Tigers would have had they would have started to create a rivalry with Cronulla based on the ending of last season.
If you're talking about Balmain in general, like you said, Glebe, New Souths, Newtown Jets, those kind of local rivalries.
Well, Newtown's basically Cronulla now, isn't it?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. They changed between Roosters and Cronulla. But it's a hard one because they're a peculiar team just because of their heritage, the Balmain and Western Suburbs and stuff. So I'm not too sure they really have a full-on rival. It's very, very strange.
Yeah, I agree. I don't believe they have a full-on rival. I just think we're going to miss out on the potential rivalry that they would have had with the Sharks. Let's move on. We'll kind of agree that there's no rival, but I think that we came to a somewhat conclusion that we can leave it and rest it with the Sharks as much as we can. The next one we'll go on is the Manly Seagulls. Now, before you guys quickly jump in here, obviously they have a rivalry with everyone, and they even have a rivalry with teams that probably haven't even joined the competition yet. So you've got to think wisely about who you would call on Manly's behalf from a Manly perspective. And my dad is a Manly fan, so I have a pretty good idea what I'm going to say. But what do you guys? I'm going to go to you first, Hayden. Who do you think on Manly's half is their biggest rival?
It's probably Melbourne. I think Melbourne and Manly create some great rivalry. But one team that I think we can't forget, and I think in recent years it started to go away, but there's always seemed to be a rivalry for me between Manly and the Bulldogs.
There has been, yeah. That is a very That's a very fierce one as well. Like I actually feel claustrophobic when I think about it. Like it's tense. It's tense, honestly.
What about another back in the day team, North Sydney Bears?
Well, back in the day, they would have had a massive rivalry. Yes, back in the day, the Bears and Manly would have had a massive rivalry.
Well, they tried to. I think there was even a joint. Was it a joint merger? Northern Eagles.
The Northern Eagles, yeah, and then basically Manly said, piss off. Really.
No.
no, they did it. They did it, and they played for I think a year or two or something, or a couple of years, and then they basically
early 2000s.
I think it's Super League days.
They kind of just went.
I don't think it was
All right,
I think
see
it was
you later then.
Super League, wasn't it?
No, I think it was early 2000s. They merged. Didn't really go well, and they said see you later, pretty much. So yeah, that's a weird one. I would say Manly's rival is the whole NRL.
Oh, literally the NRL itself, not even clubs, just the NRL itself.
Even the English Super League don't like them.
Even Manly don't like Manly, and we all know it. So I think like I said, there are many teams. I think that Manly probably. Their main win that they want to get is obviously the Storm. If you're going to come down to the team coming second in that, I still think it also comes down to Cronulla, simply because of the Battle of the Beaches. But you do have the Knights there, that they do have that 1997 revenge kind of animosity towards.
With the Bulldogs, Manly and Parramatta, it does go back a long, long way. I would still say Melbourne are right up there, though. Yeah, the diehards would say probably Parramatta, to be honest.
I think the diehards might actually say the Bulldogs, like Hayden's saying. There is the Bulldogs, the Sharks, the Knights, and the Eels who are in that kind of category. I think that they don't really care.
The Roosters as well.
Yes and no. Yes and no. But I think they wouldn't say the Sharks because Manly has a crazy record against the Sharks, so it's like they don't really care. They know they're going to win that game. I find that the Knights, the animosity, the Bulldogs is a very tense. I'd lean with the Bulldogs, but then again, I just don't think in recent years it's been anywhere near as up there as the other teams.
I can't really put it on one. There's just so many.
All right, well,
I'll lock in the Bulldogs.
Now we're getting towards the end here of the teams, and then after this, we're obviously going to quickly go through who we think is the actual biggest rivalry out of all of this. Next up, we're going to go with the Roosters. Who we going with here?
I think the Bulldogs have been a Roosters rivals back in obviously South Sydney, but back in the Haslam and Sonny Bill days, the Roosters really were a rival to the Bulldogs. I feel like
in recent years, you could say there's a bit of rivalry between the Roosters and the Broncos. The Rabbits are a team that go back a long time with them, but I think there's a rivalry even brewing, and I think it's been there for a couple of years now between the Broncos and the Roosters.
I know what you're saying. Yeah. There is something there. I don't know if it's fierce, though. I don't know if there's any tenseness really behind it. But I remember a game a couple of years back. I think this could have been 2015, actually, when they played before they played the Cowboys in the grand final. I believe they played the Roosters the game before, and there was an intercept. And I don't know what it was, but I for some reason I just got this switch in my head as if like things have changed. I don't know what it is, but I feel like you're onto something there. I'm not going to say that
the Roosters don't care about Canberra as much as Canberra care about them as well.
That's what I said before. That's why I think it's too fresh to kind of be talking about that. I don't feel like the Roosters care about Canberra whatsoever. So I think we're all going to agree here that obviously the Rabbitohs are their biggest rivals, but I do agree that the Broncos, there is something there. And obviously Brisbane versus Sydney always has a rivalry. It's the equivalent of Queensland versus New South Wales. It's like that in every sport. Queensland Reds and the Waratahs have a big rivalry. You've got the Sydney FC versus Brisbane Roar, they have a big rivalry. So that's just how it always is. Okay, next up we're going to go with the Dragons.
I'm going to say the Bulldogs, weirdly.
Interesting.
I'm going to say the Sharks.
That's based on local. That's based on local. I don't know if that's necessarily based on quality at the moment.
Locally, Sharks, but I feel like the Dragons and the Bulldogs have just always had big matches just in general. Like Anzac Day stuff usually seems to revolve around those two, doesn't it?
Anzac Day. No. Anzac Day is Roosters. Dragons. That's a big rivalry.
Is it? Actually. I've seen Bulldogs and Dragons have a fair few good games, to be honest.
Maybe on a week. I don't see it. I don't see the Bulldogs as their rivals. I'd say either locally the Sharks or obviously, like I said before, the Rabbitohs. But then you also do have the Roosters. I'm gonna straight up say right now that I think based on that Anzac Day clash that I personally feel it's the Roosters.
I'll go Roosters as the second one as well. I think, what you said locally, Sharks and the Dragons have had something brewing, and I don't think it's mostly on Cronulla's side. I think it's on the Dragons side, but they do definitely turn up and have that against the Roosters on Anzac Day, and it's always a close game, even if the Dragons are right down the bottom of the ladder and the Roosters are in first. They're always brewing.
Yeah, it's always a close game between those two. So I feel like we're probably going to have to leave it with. I think we're going to go with the Roosters because it's more of a consensus, but the Sharks are obviously the local one. I just can't see it based on their quality. I don't see the Bulldogs one. That's obviously something that you can see, Luke, but I personally don't see the Bulldogs as their rival. But we'll see in the comment section. If you're if you're a Dragons fan, please let us know in the comment section if who your biggest rivalry is, and actually for any fan, tell us who you feel like is your biggest rivals. Now, obviously, we're getting to the two teams at the bottom. So the reason why I left these to last is because I want to see kind of the lower team that if you feel any animosity. Obviously, I'm a Titans fan. We'll get to that. But Warriors, who we going with for the Warriors?
Tough one.
I don't know.
I've got a pretty good idea.
On the Warriors end, I would probably say Melbourne.
Melbourne is there. I'm going to throw out a really interesting one here, and I know you guys are going to really question it. However, hear me out here. The Titans and the Warriors, every year on the Gold Coast, we all see Warriors fans absolutely pack it out. It's sold out because the Gold Coast is a very big base for when New Zealanders come over to Australia. I feel like New Zealand always knows they're going to beat the Titans because they've had a really good record against us. They are our bogey team. Everyone's our bogey team, but specifically the Warriors are our main bogey team. And I feel like we do have a serious rivalry with them. It's not an animosity rivalry. It's not a rivalry, where I'm angry, and I don't feel like New Zealand's like that as well. But there is definitely a rivalry between the Warriors and the Titans in regards to the fact that Gold Coast is a massive Kiwi population.
I won't disagree with you on that. I think the Titans have a bit of a rivalry, but as I said, the Storm. I think going back again to that Anzac Day clash, that's a big firework for rivalry for both of these teams, the Dragons and the Roosters. And I think it's the same for the Storm and the Warriors, in my opinion. I think the Warriors always turn up. But yeah, you're right. Bogey team for the Titans is definitely the Warriors. So I'd chuck them in there as rivals.
Warriors have had some good matches against the Roosters.
Yeah, but I don't think there's any real rivalry there. I just think that's just having good games.
Yeah, I don't really feel like they have a massive rival. If there was another New Zealand team, then yeah.
Oh, that'd be, dude. I nearly think if there was a North Island versus South Island, that'd be the biggest rivalry in the game.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Okay, well, just so that we can have something to say, just so we can throw one out there.
Yeah, maybe the Storm. The Storm, there is something there. Yeah, I'd have to say the Storm. Maybe I do get where you guys are coming from.
And finally, we've got the Gold Coast Titans. I'll just weigh in quickly here, base. Actually, no, you know what? You guys go first quickly.
It's for me, it's got to be the Brisbane Broncos. I think there's a really good rivalry. It's not something like when I think of Titans and Cowboys and they say that's rivalry, I think it's complete rubbish. But between the Titans and the Broncos, there's something there. They've beaten them a couple of times, the Titans. But
we've beaten them a lot at Suncorp recently, but they always flog us at Seabus recently.
At Seabus, yeah. I was going to say, you go up to Suncorp and beat them there, but I think there's something going on there, and big brother versus little brother, two Queensland teams. I want to ask you guys this, and as a Titans fan player, do you think that the Broncos and Titans games will ever be as big as the Cowboys and the Broncos? If there is something to ignite it, do you think that it will be as big as this Queensland rivalry we've experienced for the last 5 years?
The Titans need to just focus on winning a game. I'm being real, like everyone wants to should a rivalry start.
I'm a Titans fan.
They need to focus on making the 8 consistently, or at least get in there first, and then consistently before they ever talk about. You don't want to be having a rival and being known as the team that's just getting pumped in the rival all the time. It's like, let's say Cronulla and Dragons. If Cronulla's just getting pumped all the time as a rival, it's not really, it's just a laugh rival, isn't it? It's like Liverpool and Everton. It's like Liverpool just smash them all the time. So the Titans shouldn't be thinking about rivalries. They need to just think about making it. But I do get what you're saying. There needs to be maybe a bit of biff in a game or something in a finals game before there's actual rivalry. But no, I think the Titans just need to focus on the 8. Don't get carried away. I think right now,
Yes, I do believe. I think it's actually very underrated. Obviously, the Titans are incredibly bad throughout the last 10 years or so. I feel like it's actually really underrated how much there is actually a rivalry between the Titans and Broncos. Obviously, the Titans, that we also have a big rivalry with Manly. We have a little thing with the Sharks. We have a little thing with the Parramatta Eels. However, and we obviously have with the Warriors as well, but that's not really animosity. The Broncos, yes, 100% are the team that, I dislike the most when it comes to who I want to beat. And, it only happens at Suncorp. It doesn't happen at Seabass. I feel like it's very underrated, but that's because, and it's obvious reasons, that's because the Titans just, on a level, no one really cares about the Titans right now. It's just as simple as that. And I'm a Titans fan, I can say that. No one cares about the Titans. So, who are you going to want to watch? The Broncos versus Cowboys, who are making grand finals, or the Broncos versus Titans, where the Titans are winning wooden spoons?
I think I definitely agree with that. But you know what? I think the Titans and the Sharks have a bit of a rivalry. You mentioned it, and I agree. I don't know about you, Luke. Do you agree that the Titans and the Sharks? You're a Sharks fan.
Yeah, for me personally, I don't really find there's I don't go, oh, this big rivalry on today. I feel like when we play the Storm and we play the Dragons, there's rivalry. Not even the Raiders. I feel more towards the Tigers for some reason, but I feel like the Storm one, there's definitely bad blood when Fafita meets Munster.
Yeah, there's no bad blood between the Titans and Sharks. There's no bad blood. I just think there's definitely something there. It's just like the Warriors, like I said. There's no bad blood.
It's more respectful.
There's a little bit of bad blood.
Respectful rivalry.
There's a little bit of bad blood with the Titans and the Eels. There's a little bit of bad blood. There's a lot of bad blood between the Titans and Manly, but it's just the Broncos of that local derby, and well, Manly's because of Cherry Evans, that bloke. Yeah. So we've gone on for quite a while now. So let's go, and we're going to summarise all this. We're going to give each of our opinions right now on who we feel is the biggest rivalry in rugby league, and this is including past, this is including present, this isn't including future, this is just what we've seen, whether it be past or present. I'm going to go to Luke first. Who is your biggest rivalry in rugby league?
From my own point,
from your own perspective,
it's definitely Sharks and Storm. But in general, I feel like Brisbane and Cowboys is right up there. And I don't know. I think in general, in the whole of rugby league, I think it is the Roosters and the Rabbitohs. They're both very good teams. It's gone on for 112 years. I just feel like it's a very traditional, heritage-based rivalry, a local rivalry, and a quality-based rivalry as well.
I'll agree. Rabbits and Roosters for me is the big one. I spoke about Broncos and Cowboys, but I don't know. From games I have seen, they've been exciting, but I still think there's a lot more to come, and they're the next generation. If I was to pick, I get more excited now for a Broncos and a Cowboys game rather than a Rabbits and a Roosters game. From an Eels perspective, I'll go with Manly. But how can we not forget the biggest rivalry in rugby league, which, without a date, from my opinion, is New South Wales versus Queensland?
Oh, well, of course. Origin, if we're going to speak Origin trumps everything by an absolute monumental Origin. And this is going to be a topic, this is a little bit of a spoiler for everyone at home listening. We're going to speak about the biggest rivalries in sport in general, and Origin will definitely be in there. So that's on a completely quadruple level compared to, individual rugby league rivalries. So I definitely agree there. That'll be for another day when we talk all sports. But in my opinion, you guys have gone with your individual teams. In my opinion, obviously Titans and Broncos, yes, that's on my behalf. But in regards to the entire competition and who I think is the biggest rivalry, I'm stuck between three. That is the Broncos, Cowboys, the Rabbitohs, Roosters, and Storm Manly. And the way I'm going to describe this as, obviously, the Rabbitohs versus Roosters is the biggest rivalry traditionally. Traditionally, it is the biggest rivalry, but I'm not excited about it. I don't get excited about it, and it's been that way for a couple of years now. They've been trying to really force feed it down our throats to really get excited about this 112-year traditional rivals, and I can't get around it like I used to. You've got the Broncos, Cowboys, and they're always playing exciting. It is relatively fresh, but it has been lingering around in the past. It is a Queensland derby. It's, Queensland, I know you're going to disagree with this, boys, but Queensland is something that everyone, it's only rugby league. It's simply only rugby league, and Broncos and Cowboys, every single person in Queensland 100% fully gets behind these two teams, and it's really hard to go past them. And then you've got the Storm versus Manly, where you've got absolute animosity. It's fierce, that players want to punch on them with each other. There's always fights. It's it's incredibly tense every single time. And we even saw to this year that rivalry is sort of thing, and they're always two quality teams. We've seen the last 20 years, it's only been Roosters, Manly, and the Storm who have basically won the competition. So my personal opinion is I'm going to personally go with my best rivalry is Storm versus Manly.
I think when you said Rabbits and Roosters, and you said you haven't been excited these last couple of years, I agree with that. But at the same time, they make some really good prelim or some semi-finals games, but we haven't seen a grand final between these clubs in a very long time. And that is what I think takes away from that rivalry. We need a Rabbits and Roosters grand final.
They've been trying to get it. 100%. They've been trying to get it for the last 10 years. Like, really, they've been pushing it down our throats. Like I said, they're force-feeding it down our throats.
I'm going to say right now, without a doubt, that last year was the year to have it.
100%.
And the Rabbitohs
fell at the last hurdle. Yeah, I know. Obviously, you guys have both gone with the Rabbitohs Roosters. I'm not disagreeing with that. I've given my reasons for the three biggest rivalries, whether it be to do with now, to do with passes in tradition, or to do with just true animosity. And I think it comes down to personal opinion 100%. I don't think, like, if you're going to give it on a generic basis, I think that you guys are right. I think that everyone's going to really more so agree with you. But on a personal basis, I'm more about that Queensland versus New South Wales style rivalry where you actually hate the opposition. You actually really, it makes you sick thinking about the opposition. And when it comes to Queensland, New South Wales, I'm a Queensland fan. It makes me sick thinking about New South Wales winning. So I feel like that's the way with Manly and Melbourne, and I feel like they feel sick with the other winning. And I'm not saying the others don't, but I just think it's on another level with Manly versus the Storm.
Storm and Manly. I'll lock in it as a second.
Heritage, traditionally, definitely Rabbits and Roosters. Locally, I feel like it is Broncos, Cowboys. But yeah, the ill blood, like the bitterness, the sourness, the hate is definitely Manly and Storm. Everyone wants to watch it just because there's probably going to be a fight.
This comes down to personal preference on how you want to watch your rugby league, really. It really does. It comes down to how you want to watch your rugby league. If it's historical, or if it's bad blood, or if it's local. That's the three that we've got here. Obviously, we've been going on for about an hour now. This has been a really, really good discussion. It's going to be really
story
divisive.
of my life, mate.
Well, gee whiz, you're bloody out of control, mate. You like we said in last week's podcast, you'd make a rivalry out of Tinder.
Definitely would.
Let's not speak about that here, Blaze. That's what you did last week. You brought up that your buddy's Tinder a sport, and if it was a sport, you'd make it a rivalry. But boys, obviously, great chat. It's going to be very divisive. Obviously, people are going to have their own opinions. Thank you guys for coming. Obviously, we'll be back next week, next Wednesday. Thank you to both Shirls and Entertain House. If you guys haven't subscribed to them, go and subscribe to them.
See you later, Blaze. Thank you very much for having us on tonight.
Thanks for having us, Blaze. Lovely chat as always. See you next time.
Yeah, very, very keen for next time. We're going to be having Jesse Parahi, the Australian Sevens Rugby Union. That's going to be very interesting. We're really going to delve deep into, sevens sport and the growth of sevens and if it can, explode and how it's being currently affected and just how the recovery process is in between. So that's going to be a very interesting podcast that I feel like we're going to really delve deep into. But that is going to do us for today, guys. If you haven't subscribed yet, jump down there, hit that big old red button, join the BK Army, and also hit the little ding-a-ling-a-ling notification bell so you get a notification every single time we upload. This In the Sheds podcast will be coming out every single Wednesday, and I'm going to be trying to get it onto iTunes or somewhere of the likes. Thanks for watching, guys. Really do appreciate you, as always. Thanks for watching. Catch you later.